How to lose an F1 title 3 times in one race. While researching for this video, I saw something that I never saw mentioned before. Indeed, Stirling Moss did lose his F1 title in this race, and he did lose it 3 times, as you will see. By only being 2 races left, which the Van Walls dominated, and having a season where he either won or retired by mechanical problems, the mistakes made in this race clearly took the F1 title away from him. 1. By not setting the fastest lap. Moss was the fastest driver, and mid-race he holds an enormous advantage over Mike Hawthorn in second place, so he took it easier, not lapping so fast as he could. When Hawthorn broke the lap record, the Van Wall pit displayed a sign saying Hawthorn record, which Moss promptly misread and did nothing about. This was the first mistake. He could go faster and beat that time. Prior to this race, the cooling system of the car had been upgraded and he never reported problems with it. Unfortunately, the pit assumed the car or the driver was not up to any new records and left him to 2 rounds comfortably in the lead. They did not show that sign ever again. This misunderstanding between driver and pits, remember that there were no radios in the cars back then, meant that Moss lost a point and Mike Hawthorn gained 1 point. If they were equal in the end, Moss would win the F1 title because he had 4 victories against Mike's 1. The problem is that he had a lot of retirements due to mechanical problems and Hawthorn was always scoring points. 2. By being a friend and a gentleman. In the last laps, Hawthorn was in front of the 2 Van Walls of Moss and Lewis Evans. When Hawthorn, seeing a Van Wall in his mirror after getting a sign reading Evans 4 seconds behind you, as he passed the pits, thought it was Evans immediately behind him. Failing to brake properly, he left the main road on the tightest corner on the back of the circuit. The Ferrari slid sideways and that allowed Moss to go by. Thinking his mistake had let Evans by into second place, Hawthorn was looking very unhappy as Moss went by. And here's Stirling Moss' second mistake, being a friend and a gentleman. The Van Wall leader thought, poor old Mike. He looks really upset at being lapped by me, whereupon he slowed down and waved Hawthorn in front again. Realizing the situation regarding the 2 Van Walls which had been behind him, Hawthorn was quick to take advantage of the courteous act by Moss and charged off down the hill to the seafront. If Moss had kept on racing on his ultimate lap and stayed in front of Hawthorn, thus being the only driver to complete 50 laps, there would have been no mess after the race, and Lewis Evans could have raced the Ferrari to the line for second place. Maybe he would have done it, removing points from the Ferrari driver title contender. By being a friend and a gentleman, Moss gave the chance of Mike Hawthorn to unlap himself and keep his second place in the race, avoiding a final fight to the line with his Van Wall teammate Lewis Evans. He didn't have to do that, and he could and should race to the finish line. But by doing it, he showed again he was a true friend and a gentleman. But even worse was what was coming, resulting from this huge mistake, something that would not happen if this mistake was not committed. 3. By showing true sportsmanship. The race is arguably best remembered for Moss' intervention in preventing Hawthorn from being disqualified, allowing the latter to retain second place. Moss scored 8 points against Hawthorn's 7. As one of Hawthorn's 6 best results of that season, it allowed him to beat Moss to the driver's title by a single point. At precisely the same corner as on the previous lap, Hawthorn failed to brake on Antunes Guimarães' departure for Lidador Street and really spun this time, stalled the Ferrari engine and was unable to put his car to work. Moss stopped and sat with his engine running to see how Hawthorn was going to get on, while Lewis Evans went by and toured around to the pits on his own. Many officials wanted to help Hawthorn, but he and Moss both waved them away. Mike tried to push it towards the circuit, but it was going uphill, so he turned the car around and, taking advantage of the slight incline and having got up enough speed, he jumped in and jammed it into gear, and at that point the car mounted the footpath going in the opposite direction of the circuit. After a few cuffs and splutters, the engine fired, so Moss drove on and Hawthorn swung round in the wide main road and carried on to complete his 50th lap and receive the checkered flag. In the end, the sport commissioners investigated the possibility that there were a violation of the regulations, because pushing the car against the direction of the circuit was prohibited, resulting in the Britain's disqualification. Stirling Moss testified that Hawthorn had pushed the Ferrari off the track and there had been no danger to any other competitor, for, as he so rightly pointed out, Hawthorn had been the only one in front of him when he got the checkered flag, all the other runners having stopped racing when Hawthorn spun. Finally, at midnight, the stewards agreed that being on the footpath did not constitute the wrong way of the circuit, and they accepted the confirmation from Moss, who was an eyewitness. Thanks to that testimony, Hawthorn kept his points and ended up winning the World Championship 1 point ahead of Moss. This gesture by Moss in Porto remained in everyone's memory as one of the great gestures in the history of world motorsport. And boys and girls, this is how you lose the title you want so much and dream about. Losing it 3 times in one race is hard. This is like those airplane crashes investigations where they find out that a series of errors have been made and it took only one of those mistakes to not have happened and the whole disaster would have been avoided. Destiny or not, Mike Hawthorn would only enjoy that title for a few months because he would die in early 1959 as a result of a car crash. The record. This race holds a record that may be unbeatable. While Damon Hill and Jackie Stewart won the 1995 Australian Grand Prix and the 1969 Spanish Grand Prix respectively by 2 laps each, the record for the biggest time difference between first and second is held by another British driver. In the 1958 Portuguese Grand Prix, set on the cobbled tram-lined streets of Porto, Stirling Moss, driving a Van Wall, beat Mike Hawthorn in his Ferrari by 5 minutes 12 seconds. Maybe Stirling Moss was thinking about this record. This is another unbeatable one. And this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe for more videos like this, and leave a line in the comments section if you have something to say or ask. I see you in the next video. Take care.